This is Mathilene Broadcasting Corporation. Inspired, inspired. But let's say people would like to vote for you. Why should they do that instead of someone from Zambia or from Mauritius? Why you in particular? Why should people vote for you?
I think the first thing is, why should you vote for yourself? Because voting is not voting for somebody. I don't concur with this thinking of politicians that we find ourselves in. I think you vote for yourself. You vote for what you stand for, and you look at the candidates that are there, and you hotspot if the network is strong in terms of values and principles, you go with them. So you vote for yourself, because if that person is inside there, you have the right to call them and say, yeah, this is not what I voted for. This is not me. So, I've presented what I stand for. I've presented my background. If it hotspots strongly with your conscience, then go with me.
Right.
But
we
if
greet
it hotspots,
everyone. Mathilene Broadcasting Corporation viewers throughout the world. My name is Tulani Ngala. Today, we'll be talking about Africa. We've got experts about Africa as a continent, its ideologies, its aspirations, and everything about Africa. Mr. Ayanda Manala Sibindi is Ndebele Prince, human rights defender, cultural activist, theater practitioner, and a Pan-Africanist. We feel so blessed to have him on our show today, The Big Conversations. So we will be having a big conversation with Mr. Manala today. Mr. Manala, we welcome you on Mathilene Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you very much, Tulani, for having me in this big conversation about Africa.
Okay, thanks very much. As I have just said in my introduction, that we'll be talking about Africa, but Africa has its people, and you are one of those. So let's talk about you first. If you can just briefly tell us who is Ayanda Manala Sibindi?
It's a one. It says, to answer the question who you are, it's probably the tricky question of all of them in the club, because we always wonder who we are, and always live to ask ourselves who we are. But the little of something that constitutes of who I am, that is my background, is I'm an African that was born Kwabulawayo, raised Wamhlanga in Mpumalanga, South Africa, and I became an African trotter because at some point I was found in finishing my early 20s in Tanzania, and I also finished my late 20s in Kenya, came back to Southern Africa, found myself in Malawi. So in my African or continental trotting, I've been a human rights defender through Action Aid International, and I have been involved with Center for Development in Arusha. So I think something that is strongly in me that stands out are two things. Being a Pan-Africanist human rights defender, and with my cultural royal background, I'm a cultural activist, because I feel like as Africans, we are suffering a lot from colonial imperialism or cultural imperialism, sorry to say. And I think restoration of Africa has to also start with our norms and ways of living. So with my royal background, as I have served and I'm still serving in the royal family of the Ndebele Nation, the Ndebele Nation that you find its headquarters, Wamhlanga in Mpumalanga, South Africa. I'm serving under the current king of the Ndebele Nation is King Makosonke II. But under him, there are many Manala houses like Manala Makerane Traditional Council, Manala Mkive Traditional Council, Dinzunza. And there are also Ndebeles when you find you go deep to Zimbabwe, Malawi, Botswana, etc. So the Ndebele Nation is very big and has got many sectors in it. But what I am currently in, it's in Mpumalanga, South Africa. That's where I serve as a royal prince. That's why most of the people say prince. It scares me because being a prince is like, say, it's a duty. So everybody, when somebody says prince, then I have to say, how can I serve you? Because that's what we learned when I was being raised as a prince under Manala Mpongo Traditional Council that is being led by His Majesty King Makosonke II.
Okay, what a colorful background. Thanks very much for that. Africans Rising. That's an organization that you belong to. If you could give us background of that organization, what is it? What does it stand for? What are its aims and objectives, its aspirations?
Well, African Rising, most of the times when we talk as African Rising's members, they always say, look, it doesn't matter who started it. What matters is what we stand for and where we are going. Well, Africans Rising is a Pan-African movement that seeks to gather all Africans with under one banner and under one citizenship that is called Africa. We have to understand that before anything happened, Africa was a place where kingdoms coexisted with each other. So we never had colonial created borders. So we are trying to restore Africa to be back to where it was, despite the challenges of what we find ourselves in modernity, given the background of slave trade, colonialization, and etc. So we're also promoting free trade across Africa. What is most important to us is bringing Africans under one family, under one banner, to empower ourselves and probably to be the most powerful continent in the globe, because we have everything, we have every resource, we've got everything, but the coordination that we have, I think we lack coordination. We have since drifted away from those Pan-Africanists who wanted to see one Africa, one family, and we are now suffering from what we can say leaders with many backbones who are leading Africans to the best interests of their pockets and their stomach, but not having a vision for Africans. So it's more like a movement that is trying to create a vehicle that resuscitates that inner zeal for Africans to connect all of us. I mean, all Africans are interconnected and intertwined. I've been across Africa. Our languages, they You know, they are interconnected, they are intertwined. Our cultural values, if you speak of Ubuntu, you'll find of Ubuntu in West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa. So we are one people, but today we find ourselves in a colonial hangover society where we've got things like countries that were not there. How do we deal with them? How do we deal with a Tonga person or a Tonga national that is in Livingstone in Zambia, and a Tonga person that is in Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe? These are the issues that we give lenses to. These are the issues that we attack. We are seeking a vehicle whereby we create one African community so that we can be a powerful continent, just like the United States of America, the United Arab Emirates. Despite their differences, but they are powerful as one. This is what we stand for as Africans Rising. We also have our declaration, Arusha Declaration, in our website that people can visit and learn more about the resolutions that we passed in our last General Assembly as Africans.
Yeah, some people have never heard of this organization, Africans Rising. If maybe you don't mind, if you could just really take us to basics. When was it formed? Where is it based? Does it have any current leadership? Things like that, just basics, you know.
Africans Rising, the formation of Africans Rising, to be honest, it started when the Africans were rising against slave trade. It also started when the Africans were rising against colonization. It continued when the Africans rose against post-colonial creation. It's still moving on. It really started at the back of Mbembesi when Tsechoyo stood against the guns of the most high-ranked British Army. It also started at the back of Mbembesi when Imbizo Regiment fought against the machine gun that was tested upon the Matebele by then. It started when Queen Zinga of Angola was fighting the Portuguese. It also started when the Mau Mau of Kenya resisted coloniality. Africans Rising on its own has always been there. It is older than me, it is older than Kwame Nkrumah, it is older than Emperor Haile Selassie, it is older than Joshua Nkomo, it is older than Nelson Mandela. It has been there all along. What I find myself in, the vehicle that has been formalized in the modern principles because they demand us to form these things, was started recently in 2017, but also the first assembly, it was here last year in August. So that's when we had our Arusha Declaration. But Africans rising on its own, it is an old concept. It is older than African Union or AU, many organizations, you may name them. We can also come and go, but Africans rising on their own, they will always be there.
Yes. Is it a political party? Is it a civic organization, an NGO? What is it?
It is a movement. It is really a movement, my brother, because we cannot contain, or we cannot give parameters of Africans rising to be who they are, to restore who they were, to any modernity thing or vehicle, I can say, because if it's an NGO, it can have its limitation. If it's a political party, it can have its limitation. If it's an NPC, you can name them all. It can have its limitations. Africans Rising, it's a movement. It is a wind of change. It is something that we are trying to move to get all Africans together towards a better continent, but most of all to safeguard our interests, the living Africans, the upcoming Africans, and those that have came and passed, to safeguard their legacy, their efforts that they put, the blood that shed for Africans to be where we are. We still have somewhere to go. I believe in this generation, it is our call to form this vehicle and compress everyone together.
Okay, so this vehicle, Africans Rising, when you envisaged this ideal called One Africa, are you wanting one Africa in terms of politics, or one Africa in terms of trade?
Well, we want to restore Africa. When we say we want to restore Africa, we want to look in all aspects, be it trade, be it political, be it socially, and otherwise. So restoration of Africa, we cannot select one sector and we leave another sector, because maybe if we touch politics, we'll be touching presidents, political parties, powerful mafias of Africa, who are, some say, gatekeepers of colonial masters, or what we call cultural imperialization and all sorts of things. So we are restoring Africa in all aspects, be it we are comfortable and uncomfortable with it. It is a vehicle where we even call our brothers who are presidents. Some of them are our fathers, my fathers, some of them are our uncles, to also regain the conscience, remind them where we are coming from. Maybe we might leave a good legacy for the future generations of Africa.
Okay. Looking back, what would you say were the specific things that led to the formation of this organization?
Betrayal, my brother. I think there's been many organizations that came, movement, vehicles that came to unite Africans, but we found ourselves maintaining colonial created borders. When we speak of free trade, free movement, it's good on paper. It's there. The Pan-African Parliament is there. It's in Midrand in South Africa. OAU is there in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. There are institutes that are there, but what change have we seen? No change. So those institutes have betrayed us to the utmost climax of each on all betrayals in the club, because they have not pursued or implemented things that have been there, that have been put on paper. Thus, this vehicle comes in as an anti-betrayal vehicle to clean our consciences, to touch the uncomfortable truths that Africans are failing to tackle. Some presidents are failing to tackle. Some organizations are failing to tackle. So we are here as this vehicle to erase all that and give hope to future generations, because honestly speaking, Mr. Nkala, most Africans are starting to give in. Some of them have given in already. In the future 50 years, as Hugh Masekela said in his interview in Nairobi, Kenya, that some Africans will say, We used to be Africans. And we are going into extinction, not by geographical location, but by ideology, by culture, by what we used to be, by who we used to be, by who we are, by social construct, by thriving to the philosophy of Ubuntu, which is you are because I am because you are. We never knew something called poverty when we had something within our communities. It's something that led people like us to say, no, I stand up to be counted. I'm joining this movement. I failed to join politics. I failed to join any other movement across the globe that was Pan-African, but this is my first movement because I think it contains those elements of saying, let's stand resolute as Africans.
As you say, you mentioned OAU. We know it is a very powerful organization in terms of its resources. But you say it has betrayed the vision. I would say it is stuck on this notion of perpetuating the 1884 Berlin Conference boundaries. Having said all that, are you against what they stand for now, what they potential stand for, or what they have failed to do?
Well, I'm not against OAU. Please hear me clearly.
Okay.
I'm against duty bearers who have failed us. Duty bearers who have been there in offices guiding their monthly salaries and pleasing other people for temporal causes. I'm against the lack of agency within the OAU to implement things that they agreed with each other when they formed this organization. I'm against every failure of the AU that has been there. But the biggest problem is with such big organizations, they are gatekeepers of those things. They come with suits, every color of any resource. They come and they speak English with diction, despite the fact that it is a colonial language. They go back in their homes, they forget what they spoke about because they've got secretaries that write their speeches. You know, I'm against that. I think people like Emperor Haile Selassie never betrayed the cause. People like Kenneth Kaunda, who said Zambia is free, but we are not free when the rest of Southern Africa is not free. They opened their gates. They never betrayed the cause. The duty bearers then, they had a generational call. They had a generational mandate. We also have a generational mandate, but how do we carry it when the gates are closed? That's why we say Africans have been rising. They've been rising since slave trade up to now. They can also rise against this colonial hangover that we find ourselves in.
What do you think has led or has made OAU to fail?
Well, I think, to be honest, since African countries, or since what we call countries that was formed by Otto von Bismarck and his friends in the Berlin Conference, since those demarcations have been there, and we took what we call of independence of those demarcations, we have been stuck in gatekeepers of those demarcations who serve their masters. And
Africans Rising, is it a global movement, a national movement, a local movement? What is it? Who is allowed to join the movement?
Your question is very tricky, because if we speak about Africans, we also speak about our brothers that left Africa during slave trade. So I might also leave Africa and come to London, and maybe my children's children come to, but Africans movement, it's a conscience movement more than anything else, because a conscience does not have borders. It is always there with you. So it is a conscience movement. From there, wherever you are, you can serve Africa from where you are. I mean, I'm always in South Africa. The next population of white people outside Europe and America, South Africa contains #1 population in Africa to have Africans that are white people. I mean, the revolution of Africa was not supported by Black people only, but also there are our brothers that supported it. So when we say Africans Rising, in limit it to a continent, a country, we are truly compressing it and suffocating it. But I think it is truly a conscience movement for every human being that is there, because I believe that those who are still masters of global capital, if they are touched by Africans Rising and they concur with its vision, its future aims and goals, they can do that to Asia. They can also do that to Australia and every sector. So it is a conscience movement for every suffering or every human being that has gone through the trend of what Africans have gone through.
Is it a membership-based organization, or what? How do you measure your size of the organization?
Well, I think we measure our size by impact, but also, I mean, if more Africans join the movement, it will give us a lot of muscles. Because if we say today, you, my brother, as Tulani Nkala, join the Africans Rising movement, you are not only adding a number, but you are adding what we call human resource that was stolen away from us through slave trades, keeps on being stolen away from us through scholarships. So we are calling those minds. We are calling those brilliant minds. You know, it doesn't matter whether you take Africa and throw it into the deepest oceans, they always rise and come up. Probably after freeing Africa from what it is, colonial hangover, they might create another system again to suffocate us. But anyway, it is measured by impact, but having more members like you, human resource added, and having our African brothers sharing a communion together and trying to push each other to thrive to the climax of our abilities and who we were, who we are, who will be in future. Our future generations shape the legacy of our future generations is what is important to us.
Okay. We have heard that there will be some elections within your organization. But before we talk about that, which I'm aware that you are you have been nominated to contest in those global elections. Before we talk about that, I would like to pose this question to you. African countries, they face different development levels and stages. That on its own, it gives Africans certain ways of thinking of themselves. It gives them some identity. So I want you to sort of dissect that for me in terms of their different viewpoints, in their different developmental stages. How does that impact on your efforts in uniting Africa towards one goal of a united Africa?
I think the biggest mistake of Africa when they took independence, these states, is to maintain colonial created borders. Because once you have colonial created borders, then that means you never won any independence. These borders, I mean, if we can review here, all these borders, we can speak about Tati region in Botswana being part of Matebeleland. If we can review here these borders, we can speak about Barotseland not being part of Zambia. If we can review here these borders, we can speak about South Sudan, North Sudan. If we can review about these borders, we can speak about Somaliland and Somalia. We can speak about many things in many ways. If we can review these borders, we can speak about Lesotho going further to what we call the Val River that is now in Gauteng and in Free State, part of South Africa. We can speak about Swaziland that was stretching beyond its current borders now. If we speak about all this, we touch some uncomfortable truths about Africa that make some gatekeepers of post-colonial activities that are still the institutes that are still breathing. Things that we learned at school, some of them are not even there. So as we grow, we have to learn and unlearn some of the things about who we are. Recent example is, did you know that Shaka Zulu had a regiment of an army of women, 4 of them, but we've been portrayed as if we never put women in any space in our communities. So these are things that we have to learn and unlearn about who we are. So these things, there was a mistake there. There was a huge mistake when African countries took its independence. They should have sat down, reviewed these colonial created borders, formed what worked for them outside the Berlin Conference, outside the influence of the Queen, outside the influence of all colonial masters, but all create what suits them, what works for them, just like the UAE did, just like United States of America did, just like the United Kingdom did, just like the European Union did. We also have the right to do that. Our fathers did their role, but they never finished the race. This is why I'm saying it is a generational call. Sooner or later, many people will know about these fake quotas. Many people will know that people that they called Zambians are actually their brothers and sisters. Many people will know that people that they called Tswanas in Botswana are actually their brothers and sisters. When I go to Kenya and I get to I did my studies in Mount Kenya, central of Kenya in Nanyuki. I was near the Embo Nation, where the Nguni people migrated for. Those are my brothers and sisters. So we failed to recognize each other as brothers and sisters, but we recognize each other as colonial with colonial created identities. We backed in the colonial activities than to demolish them altogether and liberate ourselves economically, socially, and politically.
Yeah, let's say as a people, as a continent, we manage to unite ourselves and become one big entity. Maybe we can call it United States of Africa or African Union or whatever we can call it. We become one country. What will be the advantages of that?
Well, you know, Mr. Nkala, you are putting a smile on my face because I'm envisioning Africa in that state. I'm envisioning its currency backed by the diamond in Marange, its currency backed by the diamond in Kimberley, the diamond in Botswana, the diamond in the DRC, not speaking about gold in West Africa, in Southern Africa, the copper belt in, you know, all those resources. Do you think we'll need anyone to survive given our weather? Do you think we'll go to anyone? We'll self-sustain ourselves. We will thrive more than any other continent in the globe. But given Ubuntu concept, we will share. We will see that our neighbors, Asia, if there is poverty, they don't die of poverty because it's not in us. We will share. We will use concept of Ubuntu to get this globe into a better place than a globe whereby there are guns blazing every day. People are thinking of a new missile to create. We are seeking for that harmony. Go to any African country, go to its deep villages. I'm telling you today, Tulani. I lived in a village in Kanjuchi. There was no electricity then. In 2015, 2014. I still long for that peaceful life that I lived there. Malawi might not have a strong currency, but it has got a strong social currency. I still want to go there and rest.
Yeah.
So this is the Africa that we are talking about. These are the benefits. Before we talk about any currency, I mean King Sibindi in Gwamnyamana to what we call Pretoria today. He lived with diamonds, the diamond that you find in the crown of King George or Queen Elizabeth there in England belonged to one of King Sibindi's palaces that was in Cullinan. The Cullinan diamond was taken in one of his palaces, Gwatlapezo, some call them it was Mazabane in Pretoria. That was my great-grandfather's place. We lived with those precious stones. We lived with gold. Not that we did not know how precious they were. We knew how precious they were, but we knew that taking care of each other is more precious than those stones.
Yeah. Okay. As I said, we heard that there will be this choosing of, is the new leadership or what? Maybe if you can explain to us, what is it exactly?
Well, after every term, it's a term of two, it's 2023 to 2026 collective coordinating board. So these people will be representing Africa from all regions of Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, North Africa, and the diaspora actually. So
mhm,
it confirms that it's a global movement because we're not we did not draw our perimeters within our own borders, but we also thought of Africans outside Africa.
mhm,
So every time they renew leadership, the movement vote for people that they think they can take this movement forward. So these people oversee and make sure that the strategies of the movement are implemented for that particular time, and they leave office for the others to avoid people like our grandfather Robert Mugabe, who claimed into power for over 3 decades. You know, we are trying to avoid those sentiments in the leadership of Africa. We are also trying to give that generational change from generation to generation. We all have our causes, we all have our goals as generations. So we are trying to renew. Change is also healthy changes. So that's why we hold these elections after every 3 years.
Okay. So what position are you contesting?
Well, I did not contest, to be honest. I was nominated.
You were nominated.
I was nominated by, I don't know who did that to me, to put me in this trouble. But I was nominated. Then Africans Rising sent me an email to say, you've been nominated to represent Southern Africa in the next coordinating collective board of Africans Rising. And well, I took time to think about it. It took a deep toll on me until I consulted a few people who said, go for it, you will represent us well. Then I accepted the nomination. Then we had to be scrutinized by the election committee. We had to be interviewed, went through some series of stages to form the final list that you find in today. So it was that process. So I am standing in to be a candidate of Southern Africa for a coordinating collective board of Africans Rising.
Okay, so when we're talking of Southern Africa, which countries are we talking about?
We are talking about all SADC countries. I think Tanzania recently joined, but they are also still in the East African community. But we are talking from Malawi coming down and Mauritius on the side. But also, like in our last year assembly, I was there in Arusha. To be honest, there was every representative from every country of Africa, which shook me, and it took an organization another 10, and its growth has been immensely magnificent and exponential. So truly, I'm happy about the progress, because there are other Africans that are in the diaspora, just like you, Mr. Thulani Nkala, who are starting to look at this movement and probably join us for a better cause. Probably tomorrow or next in the future to come, I'll be the one interviewing you in my position.
Okay, so in Southern Africa, how many candidates are there? Is it only one winner who will represent Southern Africa, or 2 or 3? Maybe if you can just give us
it's only one winner. The people that made it to the final list are 2 brothers of mine from Zambia and 1 sister of mine from Mauritius.
Okay.
But one of us has to represent Southern Africa in the collective coordinating board. So we are looking for one candidate to be pushed into that collective board. But nonetheless, Mr. Nkala, be it's me or my brothers from Zambia or my sister from Mauritius, what is important is that we have a Southern African representative, because Southern Africa has been behind in terms of pushing continental movements.
But let's say people would like to vote for you. Why should they do that instead of someone from Zambia or from Mauritius? Why you in particular? Why should people vote for you?
I think the first thing is, why should you vote for yourself? Because voting is not voting for somebody. I don't concur with this thinking of politicians that we find ourselves in. I think you vote for yourself. You vote for what you stand for, and you look at the candidates that are there, and you hotspot. If the network is strong in terms of values and principles, you go with them. So you vote for yourself, because if that person is inside there, you have the right to call them and say, yeah, this is not what I voted for. This is not me. So, I've presented what I stand for. I've presented my background. If it hotspots strongly with your conscience, then go with me. But if it hotspots strongly with my Zambian brothers or my Mauritius sister, then go with them. What is important is making Africa better. I think this is where we get it wrong, Mr. Nkala, in most countries, whereby people are voting for people instead of themselves.
Okay. You are coming with a nice twist to this. It's interesting. All right. I think we have gone as far as we could today. However, if you could just give us your closing remarks, that would be appreciated.
My closing remarks will be, there's a wind of change. There's a wind of change, Mr. Nkala, truly. Be it African Union is there or not there, be it Pan-African Parliament that is in Midrand, South Africa, is there or not there, there is a wind of change that is calling all Africans to rise against all kind of oppression that we inherited from slave trade, colonization. You can name everything that is anti-African. That window of change is even bigger than me. If I fail today, if I make it maybe to this board and do my duty and leave, that window of change will always be there until Africa is restored. So this is a clarion call not only for me, but for every African that is listening to this, to join the movement on conscience, not to add numbers and vote for Ayanda. I'd rather lose these elections on principle than to win them because of just mere numbers, because I'm just your brother, Mr. Nkala. I say, let me vote for Ayanda. But if you hotspot to this rising of Africa, let us rise together, my brother. Let us rise together, all Africans that are in all corners of the world, and let us make our continent a better place than a laughing stock. And many things have been said about us. Donald Trump has said things about us. President Putin once said Africa is a graveyard where people come and die in, but when they seek medical attention, they go to better facilities in Europe. We've been a disgrace in all decades, truly, in all decades. We need to do something. We need to rise. Can we rise together? Can we stand up? Can we speak the uncomfortable truths to make the comfortable gatekeepers of colonial masters uncomfortable, and to make uncomfortable Africans comfortable? So let us rise together, my brother. Thank you very much for this opportunity and for sharing the little that I have. I'm looking forward to learn and grow and do my duty as I'm existing as an African. Probably I'll leave a generations. Probably this video will also be seen by my child, by my great-grandchildren. So what will the future generations say about you? What did you do for Africa? What did you do about it? You know, thank you very much.
No, thanks very much, Mr. Manala. It was an honor to have you on Matabeleland Broadcasting Corporation. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this was Ayanda Manala Sibindi, a dynamic young leader who is pursuing ideals and ideas bigger than himself. Africa has a future with such young leaders, with fire in their hearts. We know Africa is in the right hands. We will put the website, then we will ask people to go and vote. And please vote Ayanda Manala Sibindi. We know that the African vision is in good hands. Thanks very much. Let's meet in other programs. This is Matabeleland Broadcasting Corporation. Inspired to inspire.